Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Disclo live presentation today, Stories and Strategies for an Inclusive Workplace. I'm Joshua Peterson. I'm the head of accommodations and experience at Disclo. Disclo is an online platform, a software package to help employers of all sizes to manage their reasonable accommodations cases in a fair and compliant way that's both fair and private for the employee, and also compliant with all the right tools that an employer needs. We are so glad that you've joined us today for what is going to be a very good and should be engaging and thoughtful conversation around inclusion in the workplace. As many of you that are joining know, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, or NDEAM for short. And we are thrilled that you're taking a moment to end this very important month with us here at Disclo, and with two of our guests that I'll be bringing on in just a moment. We do love to have lots of comments and engagement from our audience. So if you haven't already, please tell us in the comments who you are, what your role is at your company, and where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know. And of course, throughout this presentation, if there's a story or something that resonates with you, or something you want to share to go along with it, then please do so in the comments. We have San Francisco, we have Brooklyn, so we're coast to coast already. Sometimes we go global, so maybe we'll see that in a minute. And I'm thrilled to spend the next about 40 to 45 minutes with you today. So if you also need closed captions are available, which you'll see if you're on LinkedIn, you'll see the little CC icon there. One note is that we are broadcasting from an online studio that comes into LinkedIn. So we are not able to see the reactions across the bottom, the thumbs up and little smiley faces. So please respond in the comments. I resonate with that. Give a thumbs up emoji actually in the comments. Engage, as you can throughout the comments. That would be great. So just want to let everyone know real quick that this is a continued series of webinars that we've done across a range of subjects. If you are not on your phone and you can scan this QR code, this will take you to our other webinars, so you can sign up for those. They're all free to view on our website, as well as if you just go to it's also disclo.com/webinars if you are on your phone and want to just open up a tab for that. So I'm going to bring on our guests. I'm so excited to have with us today. So first is Jodie Cenci. Jodie is the HR director at primary.com. Primary is a clothing company that has wonderful clothes. Check them out, primary.com. And they can accommodate all of your creature comforts. I was just looking on there the other day, and they have sweaters and things for your pets, for your dogs. We might need to get that. And Jodie just a little while ago offered that she senses that my family needs some matching pajamas for Christmas. So we'll see. Could be a first in the Peterson household. We've never been able to pull that off for Christmas. And I might have a high schooler or two who might be very adverse to actually trying to pull that off, but we'll see if that can happen. Jodie, thanks for being with us today. And please take a minute and introduce yourself a bit and talk a little about your company and more about your role there.
Sure. So, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm the HR director for Primary. And as you mentioned, Primary is primarily a kids' clothing company. We kind of focus on your very colorful basics, things that um, can be worn together, separate, matching, just kind of giving kids that autonomy to express themselves through their clothing. And one of the biggest things that kind of sets us apart is that we differentiate babies versus kids instead of girls versus boys. So we definitely have a focus already on inclusion and offering something for everybody. But we do have pet and adult clothing too. So this is definitely the time of year if your family likes those matching holiday photos. And I think it's also a good time to get the high schoolers in on it too.
Yeah, Excellent. Thanks, Jodie. I'm going to bring on Cynthia real quick to introduce herself, and then we'll all be together and start talking about the topic of today. So Cynthia Fucci is the Director of Operations at Healthie. Healthie provides the back-end services for healthcare providers to run their operations, such as virtual care, follow-ups, calendaring, scheduling, building a follow-up plan, say for a physical therapist. You want to make sure your patient does these exercises 3 times a day and such, where the patient goes and engages with those scheduling and things like that. Cynthia, a little more about yourself and about Healthie.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here. So I manage people operations and the administrative functions for Healthy, and we like to say that we offer business critical, health care critical software. We're powering those virtual first healthcare delivery services to improve access to healthcare, really enable better healthcare outcomes through technology.
Awesome. Thanks, Cynthia. And we're all going to be here now. And just want to say we are global. We have Kate here from the Philippines. Thanks for joining us from the Philippines. So we've gone global. We also have Olympia, Washington, and I saw Connecticut and several other states, New York, Virginia, DC metro area. So again, we're thrilled to have everybody with us. And so our topic today is stories and strategies for a more inclusive workplace. So I just wanted to give a moment first, Cynthia and Jodie, could you share, maybe a moment in your professional journey where the importance of inclusion, especially around disability employment, truly resonated with you?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess for me, there was a really big moment. It was over 50 years ago. It was a while ago, but it stuck with me and heavily influenced how I look at workplace inclusion. At the time, I was managing operations at a nonprofit that provided services for children with developmental delays. And we ended up hiring a consultancy to help us write a grant proposal. And what happened was their manager ended up approaching us and asking if we'd be willing to work with their employee who was deaf and who would require using American Sign Language translation services. And that would be having somebody over the phone, it would be an intermediary. And I remember him saying that he thought we'd be more understanding because of the nature of our work. And of course, we agreed. The reality was she was very well qualified and the accommodation was straightforward. It was no different than if we were, working with somebody over the phone or having email interactions. So it was a surprise in that way to be asked if it was okay. But what really struck me was how that manager felt compelled to advocate for and to sell the idea of us working with her. So I was thinking, like, why is she being treated any differently? Did other companies express reservations? These were the kinds of questions that were going through my head, and it changed my perspective about bias in the workplace. It opened my eyes to how other people's experiences could be around exclusion. How it was so commonplace, like it was just something that they did and experienced on a regular basis, probably. And years later, I joined my first tech company, was providing advanced captioning and ASL services, which helped to push the boundaries of inclusivity for individuals with hearing impairments. And I got to see firsthand that these kinds of services are out there. We see closed captioning now, and it's really continued to improve. And it makes it much easier to provide accommodation services for companies to make sure that's in place. But even when providing those accommodation services, bias could or may still exist in ways that can impact the employee using them. So I think that I see it as like the biggest gap to bridge is really with bias and in people's perception about it. So making sure to like regularly engage in conversations with your team, with managers in particular, about inclusion, and that can really help to counter bias and foster an inclusive environment.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I have things I want to say, but Jodie, I'm going to let you, maybe if you want to say, I see you shaking your head, perhaps something to kind of respond to Cynthia, then why don't you answer the question for yourself as well?
Yeah, that was such a great story, and I know I have plans to talk about the kind of continuing struggles of bias against people with disabilities, both in the workplace and outside. So that was just a could not stop myself from aggressively nodding. So I guess my experience kind of starts way before I even started working. Working with individuals with disabilities is something that has gone back to middle school for me when I went through a string of very difficult surgeries and got involved with a camp for kids who have serious chronic and terminal illnesses and disabilities. And that was my first experience with inclusion because it was specifically designed for kids with all sorts of needs. And to just be able to see the kind of joy that somebody got out of inclusion was incredible. But even with that experience that I had, and even with my own medical problems and with needing accommodations of some sort since I was 14, I never really felt disabled enough to really champion for it and to be loudly inclusive in the workplace. And so, I wrote very sensitively worded accommodations messages in the handbook, and I sort of just assumed people would just know that, I'm somebody who cares and they can absolutely come to me. And just kind of hadn't really given it much thought, unfortunately, beyond that, and kind of wanted to separate myself a little bit from being the one with all the medical problems. And even though I still continued to need accommodations because was asking for ergonomic stuff before it was cool and before it then became commonplace without even realizing that those were accommodations, but that's exactly what it was. And I just kind of continued to skate that line of being very, very empathetic without really knowing how to be more involved in that effort. A couple of months ago, I started experiencing a significant amount of pain, and I kind of thought it was just related to everything that had happened in the past. I have funny joints, all of that. And over the summer, my kind of physical capabilities went downhill very dramatically, very quickly. And I found myself no longer able to hide from it. And I had to ask for some pretty significant accommodations because I could not even get close to working a full day. Um, and at this point, I didn't have a diagnosis. I was pretty sure I knew what it was by that point, but even with knowing everything about the ADA, FMLA, short-term disability, everything from the HR perspective, going through it as an employee was just terrifying. Having to admit to my bosses, and it had to be to my bosses because I'm an HR team of one. So I didn't have HR to go to. So I also had the experience of just an employee who wasn't even sure what the right way to do it was, since I did know the right way, but that was talking to myself, and as it turns out, that doesn't really help you, get accommodations. So I just had this, very bizarre kind of, experience of navigating the world of requesting accommodations, and I knew immediately there has to be a better way to do this. And if I'm this scared, what about people who don't know what they're entitled to under the law? What if they don't understand their benefits as well as I do? And within this it was within about a 3-day span from when I realized that I have fibromyalgia to when I had to ask for a lot of flexibility in my time because I couldn't work a full day, and when Disclo contacted me, it, all just kind of, came together that there absolutely is a better way to accommodate people with disabilities and to structure that process and to structure things just in the general course of work to make life a lot easier for people with disabilities. And now that I've had this experience kind of in every little piece of the employment puzzle possible, I if there, wasn't more of a sign that could have beaten me over the head. I don't know what it is, but now I'm definitely on this crusade to be loudly vocal about how important it is because my experience would have been vastly different if I was met with skepticism or, you know, a bunch of red tape or wanting a bunch of medical documentation, which I didn't have. And I was still weeks away from the doctor's appointment with the rheumatologist. That took like 7 weeks to get set up. So, in all of this time, there could have been many different points where I could have been honestly forced out of the workplace permanently, if not in a short term. And just having been given so much flexibility and so much grace and just everything that could have gone right in the process did, for as many like goofy things happened that um, I was able to see like how I can talk to other HR people to make this process easier for other people.
Yeah, well, thank you both for sharing your experiences. A couple things I pick up there is obviously having gone through some experiences yourself make you more empathetic and understanding toward others. And Jody, in particular, for you as being an HR director and being in HR, and kind of putting those policies out there and in place, and then the difference between kind of going through it yourself makes a big difference. And for you, Cynthia, seeing you just it sounds like many years ago you just kind of assume and think, hey, if it were me, I would be accommodating for somebody that has a disability or needed interpretation. And then you kind of find out that it's not, maybe not everyone else is as nice and kind and understanding and inclusively minded as you are yourself. And the fact is that unfortunately, people with disabilities are sometimes looked at as there's various impressions, right? And so that is why the NDEAM, the National Disability Employment Awareness Month, is so important, where organizations like Disclo and like Primary and Healthie and others can really take some time to make sure that the world is really aware of issues around people with disabilities becoming more in the workforce, and really the incredible perspective and experiences that we can bring to the workforce is so important. And there's nothing quite like experience, which is kind of what today is about, is sharing some experiences, learning from experiences. I want to say to the audience and those viewing, please share in the comments, if you're resonating with what Cynthia or Jody is sharing. If you've had similar experiences, please, please share those. Maybe there was an aha moment for you when you realized something, similarly. So thank you both for sharing your experiences. Jody, specifically, I'm wondering, for you, as you went through the experience, and I'm really glad that you found flexibility and understanding and accommodation, at your company from your leaders. And I'm wondering that as you kind of went through this, did it help you to find new ways, or was already primary? Were there ways where that primary is already exemplifying the intersection of disability and employment in positive ways, or are there ways that you've exemplified that more through NDEAM this year?
So I've realized that there actually has been really good structures in place and laid down to make opening the doors even further possible, but we already have a lot of policies that required me to ask for less. One of them being the fact that I do work from home. I probably by the end of July was not in a position that I would have been able to continue going into an office, and
Mhm.
I only had to miss a little bit of time um, because I can continue to work from home and I can work comfortably that way. So that was already helpful. We have unlimited sick time at primary. And so I didn't feel like I've ever needed to sacrifice time off to actually recharge. As somebody who gets sick a lot, that's always a concern of mine. And like combined PTO buckets and unlimited PTO buckets, I was always hesitant to use too much time because I get sick a lot and I never wanted to like feel bad about that. But now, like having these two buckets, I can actually see, oh, I am still supposed to take time for myself and plan for that. And I get to do that. And primary has a 4-day work week, which I know is a huge, huge benefit. And being able to use Fridays flexibly is something that continues to help me, and I think would continue to help other disabled employees. I still have trouble kind of by like Thursday afternoon. I'm starting to lose steam a little bit. And
Mm,
knowing that I have flexibility to use Friday as I need to means that when I can feel that I'm starting to lose steam, I can just stop and take a break. And that means that I still have a whole extra day of padding to do things that maybe I had wanted to do on Wednesday or Thursday, but I was fading a little bit and knew that I would be better when I was fresh. So like having some of these super flexible policies was really helpful. But I think where I see the most encouragement and now intersection is just the fact that I have been pretty transparent in talking about it with
mhm.
people to the extent that it makes sense to come up. I'm not just like, hey guys, like, guess what I was doing yesterday? I was at the doctor all day. Um, but I have now been able to engage in conversations with people about disabilities that I have found out that they were trying to manage on their own too.
Yeah.
And so like it reaffirmed how I realized that if people aren't coming to me, it means that they're trying to do this all on their own. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of naturally been able to open up the door to conversations that I'm really excited to continue having in the next couple months.
Excellent, excellent. That and I kind of I see people that are watching probably primary.com careers like that. Those are some great policies in place. That's wonderful that you already have that flexibility. And that does the fact that employer, and I know Cynthia Healthie comes from the same place, and I want you to answer the question here in a moment too. But just having just kind of flexibility built in to say, hey, sometimes life happens that affects work. Sometimes work happens that affects life, and that we can understand that and be flexible. And be real about it. Just helps, your employees with or without disabilities to be able to, maintain some life balance and care for themselves as needed. So, Cynthia, for you, healthy. What are some inclusive practices at that kind of intersection of disability inclusion in your organization?
Yeah, so we have a lot of very similar ones too, and in particular the flexible time off. We used to call it unlimited time off, but then I think Jodie, you mentioned encouragement. One of the things we noticed is that people who heard unlimited were like, well, how much is that? If I take too much, how do I know if I'm doing too much? So we started doing recommended minimums of 20 days off. So it's like 1 week per quarter, that kind of thing. But if you need more, you can do that. We have wellness and sickness days separate. And so we encourage our team members that way. And we also have that flexible structure. We're remote first. That's one of the biggest changes that we did. Originally had an office just in New York. And then when COVID happened, everybody went kind of remote. And Healthie was like, this is working really well for us. We started being able to expand, and it was across the country. We found we were able to get great talent who could work from anywhere that they were the most comfortable. So being remote first really opened up a lot for our team as well. And yeah, we also focus on things like not just the benefit side of it, but career development programs and making sure that team members know how to access the services that we're putting in place. So reminding people this is what we have, because a lot of people won't always feel so comfortable. They are trying to manage it themselves, even if it's something that we could just make it easier to do on their own, so that they don't have to say it out loud to somebody and maybe worry that they're going to be looked at differently from there on. I just want to make sure that it's available and in place for people to use.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks for sharing, both of you. So let's see. Maybe we'll go with talking about a little bit of how do you ensure that these inclusive strategies aren't just policies on paper, but how do you through your organization, and maybe the answer is a little bit different. Cynthia is head of operations and kind of HR in one, and Jodie is HR director of one. As she mentioned a bit ago, but as leaders in organizations, you have an opportunity to probably have hopefully a seat at the table of some decisions and policies and really practices for the culture of your company. So how do you help drive that policies aren't just on paper, but they're actually lived out, breathed out, and part of the culture for every employee? Cynthia, why don't you answer this one first?
Yeah, it really can't be by accident or coincidence that things just sort of happen. You have to do it consciously. For us at our company, we start by using our core values of respect, reliability, and resilience. And we use that as our North Star, and then we try and make sure that we're committed to embodying those every day. So we can first, we'll probably do it in steps, like where we figure out, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want? What do we think might make them have the biggest impact? Budget and things like that might be an issue that you have to take into consideration. So start where you can, and then work through writing out those policies, right? Get them in place, get the services in place, but then taking it every day, making sure that you are encouraging your team members, letting them know that you're there and the services are there and everything that they need is all in place for them, so that they can bring their best selves to work. We want people to stay with us for a long time. Here at Healthie, we've had some people, we're a smaller startup, or we're growing rapidly, but we've had people about 9% with us over 5 years, 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then up to 22% over 4 years, which is amazing in the startup world. And over 50% of our leadership team is women. So yes, so it's the things that we're doing every day. We're living out these values and making sure that we're supporting our team members, because we are a very diverse group here, that it's supporting us to each do the best work we can.
Excellent. And I think the very first line you said really drives all of that, right? It's not by accident. You have to be very intentional about it. Jodie, what do you want to add?
I was that yeah, I loved that line. That was so good. I think one of the advantages of working at a small company is the amount of kind of influence that you get to have over policies and procedures, and I'm really realizing what a privileged position that is right now. So I was planning to do at the end of the year, like I usually give like our handbook like a little glance over, and decided like this year I'll actually like read the whole thing. And like now that's going to be like a complete, like really go through it and make sure that I'm happy with every single word, that every single word is conveying the level of inclusion that I want it to. I was planning to do some training for managers at the start of the year to remind them about Primary's recruiting process. I also have the opportunity to go through that process with a fine tooth comb and remove every barrier that I possibly can. And like shout out to all of the resources that Disclo has for managing employees with different kind of disabilities, because I'm going to be using that to look through all of our processes. I think it's really interesting and important to look at what have been norms that don't need to be norms, because they're not necessarily helpful or inclusive. And I think especially when we start to think about employees who are neurodiverse, that there are just a lot of inherent things that companies are doing that they don't have to do that way. That I think even with small changes could actually help a lot of employees who may not need other kind of accommodations. So like I'm really looking forward to digging into kind of those things that we could just change completely how we're doing, because we're small enough to still make those changes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Jody. That does make a difference. And then there's always that question of, as you grow and scale, right? How do you maintain that? And I think that really hopeful with both of you coming from the place you do now, right now, being empathetic and understanding from your personal and professional experiences, that you'll be able to influence the company as it grows. I want to say a couple things. We had some comments here from I think it's Jackie saying realize that her last firm, the companies don't actually give accommodation process in place, and the main thing, you can't actually see the end of this comment, but the main thing she's saying here is that open communication has been a game changer for me as an autistic professional as well. So that's absolutely key. And then Monty supporting that, saying that creating a safe space and open dialogue is super important. So just cheers to both of you for maintaining your workforce and your workplace to be open and accommodating. And then also just in the comments, Jacob, who's with Disclo, just shared a link to our blog, and as well as Sophia, who's with Disclo. So Jodie mentioned, she said, kudos to the resources that Disclo provides. We have provided several articles on top accommodations for certain conditions or how to manage employees with certain conditions. And those are great resources, I'd say, for, HR or employee relations or company leaders. I know a lot of times, when I was a HR business partner back in the day, I'd be looking for resources to bring into the staff meetings for the organizations that I supported. And this would be something, where you could bring these kind of things into, hey, let's have a quick learning moment as managers. If you have an employee who might be exhibiting these types of symptoms, it's possible they have this kind of condition, and maybe you just try managing them differently through these things, having some understanding and et cetera, that may go the extra mile for some of those employees. And then one person commented here as well, and this is a super right. It just starts with a simple question: how can I help you? Right, and then taking the information that's shared and actually using it. So great. And Kate, I see that question. We are going to have kind of a dedicated Q&A here in a minute, and we'll answer that question in a bit. And as well as anyone else, if you have questions for Jodie or Cynthia specifically, or just around accommodations and inclusion, disability, employment, feel free to go and start asking those, and we'll build up a few questions. Let's talk about fostering community. So, are there any community or networking groups? First, Jodie, at Primary, that focus on inclusivity and diversity?
So I'll say that being a small company is something that I have just kind of like continued to bat around in my head of how to do that in a way that doesn't just make it like three people in a group, having it be something that um, is still going to be a space where people get kind of that comfort even in a smaller setting. We did put into place a culture club within the last couple of months that I do plan to kind of use as a resource here, and that's just a cross-functional group of people who are excited about enhancing primary's culture. And we have some of these sub clubs, I've been calling them because I'm really bad at naming things. But next year, I think it would be cool to start one kind of in the inclusion and diversity space, because I think we already are doing a lot of things, but I think there's so much more that we could be doing. And um, that kind of drawing from employee ideas has always just been one of my favorite parts about being able to have my ear right to the ground with my teams.
Excellent, thank you, Cynthia. What about at Healthie? Any groups around inclusivity and diversity, and if so, any lessons learned you want to pass on to other organizations that are looking to bolster in their inclusive efforts?
Yeah, so we also have being smaller, we have a similar thing going on here too. We have a lot of Slack channels that are dedicated to more of the culture side of things, as well as specifically geared toward women and to that nature. ERGs, employee resource groups, is something that we want to focus on getting up and running too. That's the next big one for us also.
Great. Let's go with one more question for each of you, and then we'll open up for a little bit of Q&A. Specifically, Cynthia, as the director of operations, how does your operational strategies at Healthie, consider and accommodate diverse needs of employees? And then can you speak to specific operational changes or maybe even challenges that you've learned through that have to initiate and enhance your workplace inclusivity as operations lead?
Yeah, so I guess resources are always a big challenge for startups in general, but also for growing companies or companies who are just starting to get involved in looking at this. You have to start somewhere, right? So implementation, it really takes that intention, time, effort, and the budget. And it can sometimes feel like you want to do everything, but you can't. And that's a big challenge, trying to keep pace with it and make sure that you can support. You want to support everybody, and you have to think, okay, one day we're going to be able to support everybody, but we have to start somewhere and keep working towards it. Everybody has unique needs, and so we just keep trying to strive for continual improvement. Getting feedback through multiple channels is really important for us to help know where we want to start and where we want to build next, and keep improving next. So we have surveys, anonymous surveys, as well as one-on-ones, places for employees to share information with us, what they want to see. And then I guess I would say that always with the benefits, that always helps, making sure that if you can, when you can, improving on those that in ways that make sense for your company, because that can look different for every company depending on your needs. And yeah, I think being remote first for us was the biggest, because it makes it so that you can have the opportunity to create the workspace that works for you, that you can have it be custom. We have an office stipend where you can choose what you want. We don't say, hey, you have to have this, this, and this, and let us know if you need something different. It's up to you what works best for you. So those kinds of things that make it more flexible, let you do what you need for yourself, and then also having in place services like Disclo. Disclo has been great for us, being able to to get the advice. Myself, I'm not an HR. I don't have that kind of title. I'm people operations director, business administrative side, and I have experience in it. But having somebody to rely on, where I can be like, hey, how do we do this? What do we need to do? How can we make this better for our team? And having resources like that has been very valuable, and definitely one of the easiest things to set up, and been very worthwhile for us. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Jodie, as HR director at Primary, from the HR perspective, let's talk about recruitment and retention strategies. What does Primary use to ensure a diverse workforce?
I think one of the things that kind of like sets us up in such a good spot for it is just the nature of the work that we do. Um, we do get a lot of very diverse candidates coming in, which we're very fortunate for, being able to start with such a diverse top of pipeline. But I think that by, putting in some things just to even make the recruiting process easier, let alone what I'm hoping to be kind of all around changes in just how we do our work. Um, those I think are going to be really important for not just recruiting, but retention, because even for people who are not needing to take advantage of some of these things, I would hope that people with empathy see just that kind of level of intention as a sign that that is evident throughout the business, which I think as they got through the interview process and once they joined the team, they would see that very apparently. And sometimes in the interview process, candidates will, not sometimes, often they will ask about things like culture and things we do to support employees. And rather than just having me as HR say it, which is one thing, but I think people also realize that, like, as HR, I don't just drink the Kool-Aid, I pour the Kool-Aid. So, like, having some of those things actually in practice says a lot more than words coming out of my mouth.
Excellent. Thank you both. This has been really great. So we have a couple of comments, and then a specific question in the comments, and then we'll open up to any other Q&A. Anyone that's just curious, and I think we can stay on a couple extra minutes. But I'm going to put this up here as we're discussing questions. So Cynthia and Jodie, both mentioned Disclo throughout, and while we don't use our webinars as like a recruiting or sales channel. Jodie and Cynthia, Primary and Healthie, are both customers of Disclo. As they mentioned, both of them mentioned the ease at which implementing Disclo has been for their organizations. They mentioned the resources and the in-house expertise that they have access to if they have questions around accommodations, or questions around cases, or questions around questions from employees on what they should do or follow processes. So if you are a company leader, an HR decision maker, and you'd like to learn more about Disclo, you can head over to disclo.com/demo and watch a 2-minute video that talks about Disclo a bit and schedule some time with us. It's a no pressure, no obligation chat to talk about your organization, your goals. And if it's a match between Disclo and your company, we'd love to do a demo and show you more about what we've built. And the real thing that sets us apart from maybe some other companies out there is that we really live and breathe inclusion and disability inclusion specifically. And we have a team that's super passionate about making the workplace more inclusive and really raising the disability employment numbers at companies, and helping employers also have a compliant process that's easy to follow, relieve administrative burden, and have something that's simple to follow but keeps you compliant, hitting all those right markers as you go through these processes. So Kate, who is in the Philippines, I believe, has a question. Would you need documents, i.e. medical certifications, et cetera, from the employee? And how would you make it not sound offending if you were asking for the requirements for them? And Jodie or Cynthia, do you want to answer this from your own perspective, or would you like me to chat through this one?
I'm certainly happy to kind of share my philosophy, but would also love to hear yours as well.
Sure.
I I try to ask for as little as possible. That's I and usually I would only need to ask if there are highly specific um, accommodation requests that really you kind of like need to hear from the doctor, but that's not the norm. And I think my own experience really helped to kind of reaffirm why I will continue to ask for as little medical documentation as possible.
Right.
Because when I needed accommodations the most, I would not have been able to provide an ounce of documentation because I was still weeks away from a diagnosis, but I needed immediate help. So that's kind of my approach, and it does not work in every situation, but there are a lot of things that can be accommodated without needing a doctor's note.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, in the U.S., Kate, I saw you. I think you mentioned earlier calling in from the Philippines. So we're really going to speak to U.S. law around the Americans with Disability Act and enforcement or interpretation from the EEOC here in the U.S. So you are under the law. An employer does have the right to request limited medical documentation to validate the medical condition or that the employee has a disability. So what we do is that if an employer, we recommend that our employer partners, as Jodie said, if possible, to grant an accommodation without medical documentation, that they just do that. Many things are simple. You have blank condition, you need a break or two of 10 minutes throughout the day to manage that condition. Like, does an employer really need to make their employee go through weeks of medical appointments and invasive medical documentation that's going to go to someone in HR, potentially their manager is going to learn about it? Like that's really not a safe work environment. But that you consider just granting simple things like that if you can. Now, for things that are more difficult, as Jodie said, that may impact productivity, some of the essential functions of the role for the employee, then requesting medical documentation from the physician just simply to validate that they do in fact have a medical condition or disability that significantly impacts their life or limits life activity, as the ADA says. But to get just enough documentation to validate that they do in fact have a disability, that the limitations that they say that they have are true. So they're limited in such capacity, and that's how it impacts them in the workplace. And that the accommodations that they're requesting are in context to their disability. So with that, the employer simply knowing that, yes, there is a disability and what those limitations are and what the adjustments they're requesting are, then the employer really has enough to consider, is this something that is reasonable and we could accommodate, or potentially could be an undue hardship and we need to discuss. But even at that point, that doesn't end the conversation. So you can discuss alternatives, other ways, really understand the need of the employee and what they're trying to accomplish, so that they can be they can thrive and be a function as best to their the ability to meet the essential functions of the role. So And so simply to how not to make this sound offending, if you're asking for this, is to make sure you are only asking for limited information. Just to say that, hey, I would phrase it something like, we at blank company are inclusive and want to be accommodating our employees with disability or conditions. And we just need to verify blank and blank, and then we can, discuss whether it's something that the company can accommodate, and just keep it as limited as possible, and not make it invasive. It becomes a problem for a lot of employees when the employer has a standard medical form that just asks, 15 questions and divulges really sensitive information, about them to their employer. And then, so I want to say any last questions that anyone has, go ahead and share those. We'll answer those. And a couple of comments. Earlier when it was mentioned, Jodie looking through, I believe it was Jodie looking through company policies and handbooks, especially for neurodiverse employees, and how to make things better. Just a comment that coming through and revising policies for neuro inclusion accessibility makes my brain happy with a smiley face. And then completely agree with this comment that one of the best resources to start the conversation and support employees and employer representatives in the interactive process and understanding reasonable accommodations is a free resources through askjan.org. We use AskJan a lot. We refer people to it a lot. So those are great resources. And Jacob with Disclo just dropped in a comment. This is being recorded. We will share the recording, and one of the best ways to learn about the recording being available, as well as keep up to date on just different articles and news stories around inclusion and disability employment, is by subscribing to our newsletter through LinkedIn or email. We don't spam. We make it really about news that's valuable to you. So with that, Jodie and Cynthia, is there any, last thing, Cynthia, you want to just say, encouragement, or kind of strategies that you would encourage folks to consider as we close out NDEAM?
Yeah, I guess I would say from an operational perspective, just keep working on improving inclusivity, and it takes time. And also with building out the processes, trust takes time. So making sure that you're living it out each day, you're displaying it, you're encouraging team members, and then they'll see it over time that you mean it, and that you are trying to improve. So yeah, just keep going. I guess it's important. So yeah, keep at it.
Absolutely. Jodie?
Yeah, and just to kind of continue on that same train of thought, if I I think that there may be some fatigue in terms of talking about, DEI stuff, and there's been kind of,
Mm,
unfortunately, a lot of those DEI positions have been eliminated or cut back, but there's still so much work to do, especially when it comes to inclusivity around disabilities. So, to Cynthia's point, like, keep fighting that good fight, and we'll, we'll get there, but we still have a lot of work to do.
absolutely. Thank you both. And as we close out ending, this doesn't just have to be a month of recognition. Even the theme for this year is advancing access and equity, and that's obviously something you, as you just mentioned, Jodie and Cynthia both, something that we want to have ongoing. We really want to bake that into our company processes and find everywhere we can to further the cause and further the message, and awareness. A few couple things like, if you are a company leader and you can influence, then influencing your company leaders to increase disability hiring within your company, shoot for a target of at least 10% of your employee population being people who have attested that they are a person with a disability. Improve that accommodations process. Again, not necessarily a plug for Disclo, but something that is needed 100%. You don't want your employees to feel that it's a burden, that they are a burden. To ask for adjustments or help that they need is going to be a burden to your company, because it's a worse burden to your company to lose an employee who has been at your company, knows your processes, and have to backfill them. The churn on the team to take on work, the cost to recruiting is actually the burden. So the right thing is to go for inclusion and to try to make an agreement where you can accommodate an employee so they can be fully thriving in the workplace, and you can retain an employee who their job satisfaction just went up because they know that their employer really cares enough to make some adjustments for them. Improve training within your organization, and where you can, highlight disability stories at your company. So with that, we're going to wrap up for today. And if there's any other comments we missed, I'll look to reply to those. But again, Jodie and Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation and the journey with you both.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.